I live in a small, quiet suburb outside of Seattle. It's one of those neighborhoods where nothing ever happens. Kids play in the street, people wave from their lawns, and everyone's friendly enough to know your first name, but not enough to actually visit. Across from me lived a man named Mr. Heller. He was in his 70s, maybe early 80s, lived alone in a faded blue house with overgrown bushes and an old Ford parked out front that hadn't moved in years. He was polite in that quiet, reclusive way. He waved when I checked my mail, sometimes nodded when I mowed the lawn. I never saw visitors, never heard music, just the faint glow of his TV through the curtains at night. Last week, he died. It happened suddenly. Heart attack, I think. An ambulance came one morning, lights flashing but no siren, and I watched from my window as they carried him out on a stretcher. He didn't look alive. 2 days later, his niece came by with a realtor to talk about cleaning out the place. She stayed a few hours, then left. After that, the house went quiet. For the first time in years, the curtains were open. I could see straight into the living room. Dusty, faded furniture, a lamp on a crooked table, and an old recliner facing the TV. The realtor said someone would come in a few days to start sorting things out. That was the last I heard. Until Tuesday night, it was around 11:45 p.m. I was brushing my teeth when I noticed something strange. The light was on in Heller's living room. That wouldn't have been weird, except the power had been shut off the day before. The niece had mentioned it when she stopped by. I frowned, leaned closer to the window. Sure enough, there was a soft yellow glow inside. And then, I saw movement. A slow, deliberate shape crossing in front of the window. Not a shadow, not a flicker from passing headlights. It was a person. They stopped in front of the recliner and sat down. My stomach dropped. For a second, I thought maybe a relative had returned. But who sits in the dark, with the lights half dead and no car outside? I watched for maybe 30 seconds before the figure leaned forward, almost pressing against the glass. Even from across the street, I could feel that wrong kind of stillness. The kind that comes when something's pretending to be human. I turned off my own light so I could see better. The glow from his house flickered slightly, as if the bulb were dying. The shape in the chair turned its head toward me. I ducked instantly. My heart was hammering. I told myself it was my imagination, that maybe it was a reflection, maybe the realtor, maybe someone cleaning late. But when I peeked again, the window was dark. The light had gone out completely. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I went across the street under the excuse of checking the mailbox. The house was silent. The curtains were drawn again. On the porch sat a small cardboard package. Amazon, by the look of it, with a delivery date stamped 2 days after his death. It had his name on it. I didn't touch it. The next few days were normal. I worked from home, tried not to look out the window, tried not to think about what I'd seen. But then last night, same time, 11:45, the light came on again. This time I was ready. I turned off all my lights, crouched behind the blinds and waited. At first, nothing. Then, the flicker of movement again, faint, jerky, like an old film reel. Someone walked past the window, stopped, turned slowly toward my house. I swear to God, I could see his face. It was Mr. Heller, or what looked like him. The same thin frame, same pale shirt he'd worn the day they took him away. Only now, his head moved in small, stuttering motions, like it hurt to turn, and then I realized something that made my blood run cold. The curtains weren't open anymore. Was behind them. I shouldn't have been able to see him at all. I backed away from the window. I called the police, told them someone might be in the deceased man's home. They came 10 minutes later, lights flashing. I watched from my window as they checked the porch, knocked, tried the door. No one answered. They circled the house with flashlights. One of the officers radioed the other, then went around the back. A minute later, both of them came back to the front. They talked briefly. Then one of them looked up at my house. I could tell by his expression that he thought I was crazy. They found nothing. Said the place was locked. No signs of entry. They'd check with the property owner in the morning, but for now, it was secure. After they left, the house went dark again. Except, right before the last flashlight beam faded, I saw the curtains move. Just a little, like someone was peeking out from behind them. I didn't go near the window for the rest of the night. Even with the lights off, I could feel it. That faint sense of being watched. You don't need to see eyes to know they're there. The next morning, I went across the street again. The porch light was still dead. The same package sat untouched, soaked through from last night's rain. I wanted to knock, but what would I even say? "Hi, I think your dead uncle is walking around his house at night," so I did something stupid instead. I set up a camera in my window. It was just my old webcam taped to the glass, aimed straight at Mr. Heller's living room. I left it recording while I worked. It was broad daylight. Nothing should have happened, and nothing did. When night came, I double-checked that it was running. At 11:30, I turned off my lights, sat in bed, and tried to distract myself with a podcast. At 11:45, right on time, the glow appeared again. The living room light flickered on like someone had slowly twisted a dimmer. I muted my phone and stared. A shadow crossed the window. It paused for a few seconds. Then the curtain trembled, like a hand brushing against it from the inside. My whole body went cold. I watched for what felt like hours. Finally, around 12:10, the light went out. I didn't check the recording until the next morning. Part of me didn't want to. When I finally opened the file, the footage looked normal at first. Just a still shot of the dark house. Then, at 11:45, the light came on. For several seconds, nothing moved. Then, from the right side of the frame, a figure stepped into view. You could see the outline of an old man in a white shirt. He walked slowly to the chair, sat down, and turned his head toward the camera. But here's the part that made me stop breathing. At the bottom right corner of the screen, in the reflection of my own window, there was another shape, standing behind me, just tall enough to be seen in the glass. And right before the video ended, the reflection moved, leaned forward, and the camera feed cut out. I tore the tape off the window, unplugged the webcam, and threw it into a drawer. For the rest of the day, I felt wrong, like the air in my house was heavier, like something had followed me back from that screen. That night, I didn't sleep at all. At around 2 a.m., I heard scratching, not from outside. From my living room window, it was slow, like nails dragging across glass. I crept toward the sound. The street outside was empty, but when I looked at the house across the street, the light was on again. Except this time, it wasn't the living room. It was the upstairs bedroom, and I could see a figure standing in the window, perfectly still, facing my house. I backed away, grabbed my phone, and hit record through the blinds. The footage is shaky, dark, but you can see it. A person-shaped shadow in the window, and every few seconds, the curtain twitches. Then I realized something horrible. Mr. Heller's house doesn't have a second floor. I didn't wait. I packed a bag, got in my car, and drove to a motel 2 towns over. I told the desk clerk I was visiting family. I lied. Around 3:20 a.m., as I was finally starting to calm down, my phone buzzed. Unknown number, the text said, "Why did you move the camera?" I didn't answer. Didn't sleep. Didn't go home. This morning I checked the neighborhood Facebook page. Someone posted asking if anyone else had noticed lights flickering at the blue house across the street. Another comment said the realtor came by yesterday to check the property and found the front door wide open. No one was inside, but she said the chair by the TV had been moved, turned to face the window. It's been 3 days now. I haven't gone back. I don't know if I ever will, but sometimes when I close my eyes, I can still see it. The shape in the window, the flickering light, and that faint reflection behind me that I didn't notice until it was too late. I don't usually pick up hitchhikers. In fact, I've only done it once in my life, and I'll never do it again. It was 2 weeks ago. I was driving home from a work trip, about 4 hours of empty highway, cutting through the northern part of Wisconsin. The road was straight and endless, the kind where radio static becomes your only companion. It was late, just after midnight, and the fog had settled in thick enough to blur the headlights. I was tired, running on gas station coffee when I saw him. He was standing just beyond the shoulder, under a flickering streetlight, holding his thumb out, a backpack slung over one shoulder, wearing a dark green jacket, jeans, and a baseball cap pulled low. I slowed down before I even realized what I was doing. I told myself it was the right thing. It was cold, and there wasn't a town for another 30 miles. When I pulled up, he leaned toward the passenger window. His face looked normal. Pale, a little gaunt, but normal. Maybe early 30s. He smiled, polite, like someone trying too hard not to seem threatening. "Hey, thanks, man." Just a few miles down the road. My car broke down, he said. His voice was calm, friendly, so I unlocked the door. He got in and shut the door carefully, almost too quietly. The smell of damp clothes filled the car. I noticed his backpack was heavier than it looked. He set it on the floor between his feet, keeping one hand on it the entire time. We started driving. For a while, we just made small talk. Weather, traffic, how dead the road was at night. He said his name was Evan, said he was heading toward Green Bay to visit his sister. But something about his tone didn't sit right. It was rehearsed, like he'd told the same story too many times and forgotten the details. At one point I asked what kind of car he drove. He paused, then said, "A Ford." No model, no color. The silence that followed stretched too long. After about 20 minutes, the GPS showed a long stretch with no exits. He hadn't asked me to stop yet, so, I said, trying to sound casual, "Where exactly should I drop you?" He looked out the window, then said quietly, "Just a bit further." "You'll see it," his voice had changed. Lower. I tried to laugh it off, said something about not wanting to miss it, but he didn't answer. He just stared ahead. And that's when I realized his reflection in the passenger side window was smiling, even though his face wasn't. I don't remember much for the next few miles. My brain was just static. I kept thinking about how far from anyone we were, how easy it would be for someone to disappear out here. Finally, a small dirt road appeared on the right. No sign, no lights. He pointed to it. "Turn there," he said. Something in my gut screamed no. I forced a laugh. "Sorry, man, I'm running low on gas. I'll drop you here, yeah? Town's just a few miles up." He didn't move. He didn't even blink. Then he leaned forward slightly and said, "You shouldn't have stopped." I hit the brakes. The tires screeched, and for a second neither of us moved. He stared at me and smiled. Not a polite smile this time. Wide. Too wide. Then, as calmly as if nothing happened, he opened the door, stepped out, and disappeared into the fog. I sat there for maybe 10 minutes before I drove away. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely keep the wheel straight. By the time I reached town, the adrenaline had faded. I stopped at a gas station, splashed water on my face, told myself it was just a weird encounter. Maybe he was high. Maybe I imagined the smile. I got home around 3:30 a.m., parked in the driveway, and went straight to bed. The next morning, when I went out to my car, there was mud on the passenger side floor mat. Thick, wet mud, but I'd cleaned the car before the trip. I also noticed something else. My glove compartment was open, and the spare key I kept there was gone. I changed my locks that same day. I told myself I was being paranoid. But last night, as I was taking out the trash, I heard something behind me. A faint creak, like a footstep on the porch. When I turned around, there was no one there. Then I looked toward the end of my driveway. Someone was standing in the fog. A man in a green jacket, holding something small in his hand. It glinted in the light from my porch. It was my spare key. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my living room with every light on, staring out through the curtains toward the street. The fog had cleared, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. Every noise, every groan of the house sounded like footsteps. By morning, I convinced myself it had to be a coincidence. The man couldn't have followed me. I'd driven nearly 2 hours after dropping him off. Still, I called the local sheriff's department, told them what happened, about the hitchhiker, about the missing key. The deputy who came out was polite but dismissive. He asked if I had maybe misplaced the spare. He wrote something in his notepad, told me to keep my doors locked, and said they'd keep an eye out. That was it. For the next 2 nights, nothing happened. No noises, no shadows, no sign of anyone outside. I started to feel stupid for overreacting. Then, on the 3rd night, I got a notification from my doorbell camera. Motion detected, 2:37 a.m. When I opened the app, the live feed was black, just darkness. I checked the history. The thumbnail showed a still frame. A man standing halfway out of the camera's view, turned slightly toward the lens. He was wearing a green jacket. The image was grainy, his face hidden by the brim of a baseball cap. But there was no mistaking the posture. The timestamp said 2:37. I'd been awake, sitting in bed, just scrolling through my phone at that time. And I hadn't heard a sound. The next morning, I went outside. There were footprints in the frost. Not big, just average-sized men's shoes, leading from the edge of my yard up to the porch. They stopped right in front of the door and didn't turn back. I called the police again. They came out, took one look, and said maybe it was a delivery driver or a prank. I showed them the screenshot. They promised to increase patrols. By now, I'd started to realize they weren't going to help me. So, I bought new locks, cameras, motion lights, and a small baseball bat I kept next to the bed. I told my boss I was working remote for a week. I barely left the house. 2 nights later, I woke up to a noise, a metallic click. I thought it was part of a dream, until I heard it again. From the kitchen, I sat up, straining to listen. Then came another sound, the creak of a door slowly opening. My heart stopped. There was no mistaking it. Someone was inside. I grabbed the bat and crept toward the kitchen. The motion light in the hallway flicked on. For half a second, I saw a shadow move across the floor. Too fast, low, wrong. I swung the bat at empty air. Something brushed past me, cold and damp like a wet coat. Then, silence. When I turned on the lights, the back door was standing wide open. The police searched the house. Again, nothing. No sign of forced entry. They said maybe I'd forgotten to lock the door. I showed them the new deadbolt I'd installed. It was scratched, like someone had been trying different keys. They said, could have been wear and tear. I started thinking I was losing my mind. Maybe I'd imagined the whole thing, until the next morning, when I checked my doorbell footage again. At 3:12 a.m., the camera had caught another movement. For half a second you could see him, standing inside my house, just behind the glass, his hand on the knob. He wasn't trying to get in. He was already there. I moved out the next day, packed my things, left most of it behind, drove 3 hours south to stay with my brother. Didn't tell him the real reason why. I changed my number, deleted my social media. But sometimes, when my phone buzzes at night, I get that same sick feeling. The one that started on Highway 41. Last night, I got a new text. Unknown number. It said, still owe you a ride. Attached was a picture. It was my driveway, taken from the passenger seat of a car. I drive for work, deliveries mostly. Small town stuff. Groceries, medical supplies, sometimes random packages for people too far out for the regular routes. The pay isn't great, but it's quiet. And I like the night shifts, or I used to. The route I take winds through the mountain pass between 2 towns. About an hour's drive of hairpin turns. Forest on both sides and maybe 3 streetlights the whole way. After midnight, it feels like driving through the end of the world. About a month ago, I started noticing headlights in my mirror. At first, I didn't think anything of it. It's a highway, people drive it. But this one car, it's always the same distance behind me, no matter how fast I go, no matter how many turns I take. It never passes me, never falls back far enough to disappear, just follows. The first night, I figured it was a coincidence, a pickup, maybe dark blue or black, with one headlight slightly dimmer than the other. When I pulled off into a rest area halfway through the route, the lights kept going past me. I thought that was the end of it. But the next night, same thing. Same time, same stretch of road, same uneven headlights. Only this time, when I pulled over to let them pass, they didn't. They slowed down too. I remember gripping the steering wheel, waiting for the car to go by. Instead, it stopped about 50 feet behind me, engine idling. No one got out. No one honked, just sat there. After maybe 30 seconds, I put the van in drive and took off. The second I did, their headlights flickered, like a signal, and they started following again. I told my boss the next day. He laughed, said I was spooking myself. Mountain folks drive weird at night, he said. They probably don't trust strangers. Maybe he was right. But over the next week, it kept happening. Always between mile marker 43 and 18. Always just after midnight. Same car, same distance. If I sped up, it matched me. If I slowed down, it crawled along behind me. Once, I tried taking a different route. A smaller service road that wound through the woods and connected to the main highway further down. Halfway through, I lost cell signal. 10 minutes later, in the mirror, 2 faint lights appeared again. I nearly drove off the road. The real breaking point came last Friday. It had been raining all evening, the kind of heavy mountain rain that makes the world feel smaller. I was halfway through the pass when I saw them. Those same mismatched headlights in the mirror. Only this time, they were closer. I could make out the shape of the car now. An older sedan, maybe from the early 2000s. Dark paint, no front plate. I tried to ignore it. Cranked up the radio. Kept my eyes on the road. Then the lights flashed once, and again. High beams. Like they wanted my attention. I pulled over onto a shoulder barely wide enough for one car. Waited. The sedan slowed down, stopped right behind me. For a few seconds, nothing moved. Then the driver's door opened. I saw a silhouette step out. Tall, thin, wearing a hooded jacket. The rain made it impossible to see a face. He didn't run, didn't shout. He just stood there, facing my van, arms at his sides. I rolled my window down an inch and yelled, "You okay?" He didn't answer, didn't move. I swear the only sound was rain hitting the metal. Then he tilted his head, just a little, like he was trying to get a better look at me. And even from inside my van, I could hear it. A faint scrape, like metal dragging against asphalt. He was holding something. That was enough for me. I threw the van into gear and peeled out, tires spinning on the wet road. The headlights vanished in the mirror for a few seconds, then reappeared, brighter than ever. He was following again. This time he stayed close. So close that every curve lit up red with my own taillights reflecting off his hood. I floored it through the pass, praying I wouldn't hit black ice. When I finally reached town, I turned onto Main Street. Headlights and neon signs lighting up the wet pavement. The sedan turned too, then suddenly veered off down a side street and disappeared. I told the police everything. They sent a cruiser to check the pass, but they said they didn't find anyone. No other cars had been reported on the road. No tire tracks matching what I described. They said, maybe it was just a local. Happens more than you think. I tried to let it go. Until tonight. Because when I went out to start my van for my shift, there was a muddy handprint on the driver's side window. And next to it, drawn in the condensation, was a single word. Follow. I didn't go to work the next night. I told my boss I was sick, but the truth is, I couldn't bring myself to even look at the van. That handprint was still there when I woke up. Half smeared now, like someone had pressed it harder from the inside. I wiped it off, but it left an oily outline, almost invisible unless the light hit it just right. That's when I decided to get proof. I bought a dash cam, a cheap one, from a gas station on the edge of town. I set it up that evening, facing both the road and the rear window. If the car showed up again, I'd have it on tape. When midnight came, I forced myself to drive. The route felt emptier than usual. No other cars, no signs of life, just the hum of the tires and the whine of the engine echoing off the mountain walls. For the first 20 minutes, nothing. No headlights behind me, no movement. I almost started to believe it was over. Then, right after mile marker 43, there they were. The same uneven lights, flickering faintly through the mist. This time I didn't pull over. I just kept driving, hands tight on the wheel, eyes flicking between the road and the rearview mirror. The sedan stayed behind me, matching every turn. At one point, the dash cam recorded the high beams flashing, twice. The same pattern as before. I kept whispering to myself, just get to town, just get to town. Then out of nowhere my radio cut out. No static, no sound, just silence. The headlights behind me blinked off. For a second, the world was completely dark. No road, no sky, nothing but the faint rumble of the tires on wet pavement. Then the lights came back on. Only now, they were right behind me, so close I could see the shape of the grille, dented and old, and behind it, a face in the windshield, pale, expressionless, and smiling. I floored it. The van swerved dangerously around the next curve, tires screaming on the slick road. The headlights didn't move. They stayed exactly the same distance behind me. Even when I hit 90, when I glanced again, for just a second, the headlights weren't on the road anymore. They were higher, floating, like the car had lifted off the ground. Then they blinked out completely. By the time I reached the edge of town, I was shaking so hard I could barely keep the key steady. I parked under a streetlight and sat there until dawn. The dashcam was still recording. When I finally watched the footage later that day, my stomach dropped. At first, it was normal, headlights behind me, just like I remembered. Then the radio cut out, and right after that, the reflection in the windshield. There was something in the passenger seat. It wasn't there before. A dark outline, motionless, facing me. I rewound it 3 times, frame by frame, and I realized what I was seeing. It wasn't just sitting there, it was mirroring me. Every time I moved, it tilted its head the same way. I called the police again. They took the footage, said they'd review it. 2 days later, they called back, said the file was corrupted. When I checked my copy, it was blank. Nothing but an hour of black screen and faint static. That night, when I got home, there was a note taped to my front door. No name, no handwriting I recognized, just 4 words, written in mud. Mile marker 41. I shouldn't have gone, but part of me needed to know. So, at sunset, I drove back through the pass. The air felt heavier. The forest was silent. No wind, no birds. When I reached marker 41, I pulled over. The pavement was scarred, like something heavy had scraped across it, and in the ditch beside the road, half covered in dirt and leaves, was a wrecked sedan, dark blue, front plate missing, the same bent grille. Inside, through the cracked windshield, I could just make out a shape slumped over the steering wheel. The skin was gray, rotting, the face half collapsed, but I could still see the smile. I called the sheriff's department. They said they'd send someone out. While I waited, I checked the side of the car and noticed the inspection sticker. It had expired 10 years ago. The date matched the same week I started my route. They never found the car when they went looking. They said maybe I'd seen an old wreck that got towed long ago. But every night since then, when I drive that road, I still see headlights appear behind me around marker 43. Same uneven glow, same distance, and if I ever pull over to let it pass, it stops too.